Okay, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. So I have a fun little review for you guys from the brand Bettimer. A little about them. They're a new AliExpress homage brand, and occasionally I'll get emails from different AliExpress shops, and a lot of times it's across multiple brands that they'll send a couple of links and offer me to kind of check some of them out. In this case, I thought this one was pretty interesting, and I had been reading quite a bit of interest in these pieces across different forums and Facebook groups. So I thought, why not, especially considering it's their summer sale, and these are currently going to be pretty heavily discounted. Now, in terms of the type of watch, I consider this an everyday watch. Some key characteristics and design when you're looking for something within that space. Of course, you're going to want that versatile blend of both sporty and dressy attributes. Now, the kind of the subgenre here is going to be the integrated steel watch, which are definitely back in style, along with the typical Gerald Genta designs. Everyone from Tissot to Tudor to GP to Bell & Ross and Bremont and even Christopher Ward have taken a crack at this classic formula made popular by Genta. This is the B8001 in the blue dial, and it's essentially a super affordable Girard Perregaux Laureato Homage, and those go for about $14,000. So this is actually meant to kind of, I guess, fill the gap. Also to fill the gap between the sizing between GP's 38 and 42 millimeter offerings, because this is a 40 millimeter. This goes for $289.99, currently on sale, plus an additional $40 off during the summer sale if you can catch that before it ends. Definitely check the site links in the description for current prices and sales statuses. So yeah, this one, you know, obviously these integrated steel sports watches are huge right now. I'm a big fan of the particular Girard Perregaux that this is actually homaging, and I've heard so many good things. You know, it's nice to kind of get these pieces in the metal, just so I can see how they really do hold up outside of just the pictures and outside of just having a very similar aesthetic. You know, how do those finishes render like in person? So with that, I'm hoping to share my thoughts with you all. So let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so I mean, yes, this is a very familiar look. Whether you're even familiar with the GP Laureato or not, you know, even the genuine GP definitely has a look that can be very much likened to something like the AP Royal Oak, thanks to the popularity of Gerald Genta. Now, I will say, though, the finishing on here is pretty interesting. It's actually pretty impressive, considering, obviously, the factors of how cheap it is. I will say that it doesn't feel, any different. Like, it doesn't feel more expensive. I'm not going to go that far on it. It doesn't feel like it has this extra layer of heft or luxurious qualities to it. But I will say, for the finishing that it attempts, it pulls it off well. And it even has a bit of an interesting kind of, you guys can see the vertical kind of machine lines there across the top. It's more than a brush, right? Because we look at the brush, this is those sides, and it's a brush side. Let me give it a quick little wipe here, because it is pretty warm as I'm recording this, so there's going to be some little, you know, smudges and whatnot on there from my hands. But you guys can see that's actually a pretty nice brush, right? So I see that as a, you know, nice little brush. And then you got the little, of course, transition to the high polished bevel, but then you look at the actual finish on the front side, and it has this horizontal machining that is actually quite deep. Because of that, it actually kind of gives this thing a little bit of brightness and luster. Of course, hard to pick up here inside the studio because it's essentially a dark room with just lights off to the left and right side. So, you know, it's lit, but it's not like overly lit. But if you guys look here, if I get it a little bit more in the reflection, you guys can see this gets really, really bright. And I don't know, I think some people might really like that. Some people might, you know, be turned off by it as well, because it is something that is very different. Like, the striations across this finish is very thick and very deep, and it just captures the light and reflects it in a very different way than just standard brushing. So yeah, I'm almost hesitant to call it brushing. I think it may be just a certain type of machining, unless they're doing like a flat brush where they're like putting it down on a surface and dragging it across to achieve that, because it is very, very uniform. Versus here, although it is a nice satinization, you can see this is definitely something that was probably more done on a wheel type of turn versus a drag type of brush. So anyways, yeah, I thought that was interesting. But getting into the dimensions, guys, which a lot of you guys are thinking about, 40 millimeters in diameter. Now, 40 millimeters for a watch like this is going to hit a lot of people's sweet spot. I personally think a 38 in this type of design is probably going to be a little bit more versatile, but there's plenty of people that are going to be searching for 40 millimeters and are going to be happy to find this, especially, you know, at the hugely discounted price point. Now, in terms of thickness, only 10.5 millimeters thick, which is great. 47.5 millimeters lug to lug, 316L stainless steel. It has a low domed sapphire there. It's a single dome, as you can see, because you can see a bit of, check that out, a little distortion at harsh angle. But as long as you're out about here, you're good to go. But then you go beyond that, it gets a bit distorted, and then you can't get the amount of legibility, you know, as normal. And you can see it's quite a low dome. But when you see that type of distortion, it just means that the dome is only on the outside and not mirrored on the underside. If it had a dome on the underside as well as the top, then you would see it rendering as much clear like this, but just all the way through. So there you have it. Getting into the, there is an AR coating on this sapphire crystal, so it does the job. It also has this, of course, fixed octagon bezel with that brushed upper and then the polished flat. So you can see this kind of circular brushing here on that upper portion, the angular side, and then you'll see the cutouts, those reliefs reveal that high polish part, which is nice because as you wear this, it's going to have some nice contrast and some play when it comes to the lighting. Now, the movement inside, although you can't see it, is actually an automatic HK PT5000. So this is essentially a Chinese ETA 2824 clone, and it beats at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of the beat rate, and has a 38-hour power reserve. I will say it's not quite. I can feel the difference in terms of the winding action, so I wouldn't say it's, you know, particularly accurate of recreating an ETA 24 or even an SW200 or one of the other kind of more mainstream clones or Swiss clones of the ETA. This PT5000 though, it has similar specs, but yeah, I will say that the winding action is going to be probably a little bit more gritty and a little bit more, there'll be a little bit more resistance in terms of the tension on the spring than you're used to if you are expecting this to perform like a 2824. Now, getting into the dial, you're getting this cool kind of embossed reverse waffle pattern with a stepped outer chapter ring there, as you can see, which does give it a really nice look, just like the GP. You're getting polished hands there, nicely done, and of course plays off of those indices. You're getting this nice date window at 3 o'clock, which is beveled around the outer edges, and it does have a color matched disc. So although probably on camera it's probably rendering a little bit more black, I will say out in normal light you'll see it more as a blue. Check that out. Ooh, trying to get it to where it's not too reflective, but you guys can see. So I think it's nicely integrated, but again, credit probably more so to GP versus Bettimer for just, taking a good design. Now, the Lume on here is actually going to be BGW9 Swiss Superluminova. You're also going to get 10 bar or 100 meters of water resistance. This also has a screw down crown. I will say you want to be a little bit careful with the threading. I like to kind of do a reversed thread, kind of push down and reverse basically as I'm rethreading it, so that I can get the threads to align so I don't cross thread anything like that. Again, this isn't, although it has the look of a watch that costs about $14K, it doesn't have that same feel, it doesn't have that same level of refinement. So it's just things to kind of be expected within this lower price point. Now, It does have integrated lugs. These are H-links that are nicely done. You have the high polished bevels as well as the high polished centers there, which flows in very nicely. It's going to taper from about 25 millimeters down to about 17.8. It does have screw pin construction, which is a nice feature. And then, you know, a pretty pedestrian double push button butterfly deployment clasp, and this is, you know, pretty off the shelf. I'm sure when they sourced that, and they just tucked it in there, looks good enough. You do also have that little you know, logo that you saw at the 12 o'clock, which looks like a B and a T, probably for Bettimer. Is what I would assume there, B and T Bettimer. So yeah, pretty straightforward. And I will now get it on the wrist and show you guys how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5 inch wrist, I think this wears really well. Very clean. At 40 millimeters, it definitely feels like a full-size watch without feeling oversized, but definitely not anything too svelte. But you know what? It does have a nice thinness to it, as you guys can see. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to get a good bit of perspective distortion, and it's going to make the watch appear just a bit larger than it actually is in person. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame here so you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. So check that out. And although I do have a slightly larger than average wrist at 7.5 inches, you can see it's quite round and tall, so it's not super flat, wide, and accommodating. So it's actually, even you with a smaller wrist, you might have a different wrist shape that is going to make this sit even better and more centered. But I gotta say, this thing is really clean. Does the job. Look at how low that lays there. Very, very nice. Nice chamfering, nice screw pin construction. This checks a lot of boxes, guys. And for those of you that really hunt these types of watches, and there's definitely a market for that, as you can see just by, you know, checking out sites like AliExpress or even just different forums. I mean, people love an homage. And, you know, I'm happy to feature homages on here from time to time, although it's kind of not my main squeeze. I do like to feature them from time to time because, yeah, homages helped me get into collecting, whether it be, you know, the Invicta Pro Diver, you know, and that being an homage to, of course, the old Rolex Submariner. So, you know, a lot of these things do carry, although, you know, maybe they're not the most timeless pieces in anyone's collection, they're still an important piece of the journey. And some people never even graduate out of homages. Sometimes they'll just keep kind of getting more and more like nicer and nicer. I mean, there's a whole market of high-end homages as well. I'm not talking about super clones or anything like that. But, you know, there are watches that definitely are going to be more expensive that are clearly trying to kind of recapture something that already exists and offer it to you at a more attainable price point. Now, this is probably the more entry-level version of that, right? That idea of, okay, here's a design. They're not really making it their own. They're just more so offering it to you at a very affordable price point, you know, with minimal changes in terms of the branding aspect. But with that said, let's actually get this piece off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, guys, pretty nice Lume there. That BGW9 is well done, nicely applied. So that's very clean, very tidy. Again, nice for the price point, guys, even though, of course, it has been a race to the bottom with a lot of these more kind of quote unquote factory brands that are out there, and they're kind of already making pieces, and then they, you know, will offer sterile dials or kind of with their own factory branding. But one thing I always do like to work in, of course, is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, guys. And I gotta say, this thing does a really nice job of playing with the light. That machining almost gives you kind of a frosted nature. Look at the way the light is just holding on those deep textures there that run horizontally across the case as well as the bracelet. So it's definitely eye-catching. You know, I wouldn't call it super refined or, you know, luxury level, but it definitely is a nice little trick there that is working. Like it definitely gives you a bit more brightness, a bit more luster to that satin finish there. So very nice. You guys can see also the dial. You're going to get a lot of play, of course, with that 3D kind of reverse waffle texturing, but you're still going to keep this still relatively, viewable, right? Like you can see this is blue dial contrasting against some nice bright indices. And even if you get into kind of, okay, now you have blue lume, the nice thing is as it transitions, you're going to have enough to where it's blue on black to where once it transitions to seeing a blue dial, now you're seeing the white kind of day lume representation. So very nice in terms of clarity and legibility in various lighting conditions. So it absolutely does do the job there. But with that said, let's actually get that. There we go. Check that lighting situation out, guys. That is, it is bright, and that again at that angle now it is soaking up that light and holding it. So it definitely adds a new dimension when you are. So if you see pictures of this, hopefully this video and my explanation kind of gives you a better idea of why does it appear so bright and lustrous. So guys, closing thoughts. It wears super flat and thin, which is exactly what a lot of people kind of wish some more of the more mainstream Genta style watches had. And this has that, and it's still an automatic watch. So very nice. It hugs the wrist well. And again, that horizontal machining just adds that brighter tone that really captures light well. So good on them, for kind of having that within their playbook and then being able to execute it at that level. So very cool. In terms of model variants, you can see the blue dial as seen here. There's also a gold dial, a white dial, and green dial options. Definitely check the site links for availability. In terms of comparable models, guys, more and more integrated steel sports watch models are coming out, trying to capture that luxury aesthetic, while the GP Laureato has proven to be a lot more affordable than icons like the AP Royal Oak and Patek Philippe Nautilus. It's still priced well out of the range for many consumers and many people who think that's a great looking watch, including myself. So while this Bettimer still comes in well below similarly themed affordable pieces from the likes of Tissot with the PRX, right? That's nice. So like it's a nice offset, right? So you think about GP being kind of that great savings versus something like an AP Royal Oak, and then this is going to come in even lower than something like a PRX, and it's going to be thinner, it's going to wear a little bit nicer, but at the end of the day, this is very clearly trying to look like a GP. But the nice thing is not a lot of people are watch fans. Even less people know about the GP Laureato. So somebody might see this and think it's actually just an honest, cool kind of new take at a watch, and they might just enjoy it and appreciate it for what it is. It's a nice design regardless of the branding that's on the dial. So for me, guys, the bottom line is this is definitely solid fun under $300 and definitely worth a look for many kind of hardcore homage and super affordable enthusiasts. There's a whole market of people that just love everything underneath $300 and they despise anything outside of that. So when you see something like this, this is basically going to go for right around I think $250, like $249, something like that, with the summer sale going on. Like that is pretty good, especially considering you're getting a hacking hand windable movement, beats at 4 hertz. It is an integrated steel sports watch, so it captures that aesthetic up close. Of course, it's not going to capture the level of details and ornate finishing and kind of the tolerances and the fine finishes that you would see from something that, more within the vein of a high dollar piece like the GP Laureato. But capturing the overall silhouette, the overall energy, I think you're going to, it's pretty easy to see that this does capture that. On the wrist, I'm not going to say that it, approaches any level of like, oh, this is impressive. It feels it doesn't do that. There are some watches that do. There are some very cheap watches and micro brands that do when you get them in hand, you're like, wow, how do they do this? This isn't one of them, unfortunately, but you know what? At the price point, I think that's fine, especially considering this is kind of this brand's first offering. So I'm sure, you know, at the end of the day, they're going to continue to refine and redo, you know, future versions later on. But yeah, I think this, especially the fact that at this price point, it's still coming with that PT5000 instead of something like a Seiko NH Movement, you know, and then offering the PT5000 as an upgrade, you know, I think that's pretty cool. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.